Welcome to the game brought to you by Dungeon Studios. I'm your host, Grumpy Old Man Merwin, here with the ever amazing, ever insightful, and ever pasty Doc. How you doing today, Doc?
Doing okay, man. It's been a rough one. I'll tell you about it a little bit.
All right. Well, before you do, let me welcome.
Tonight.
Oh, go ahead.
No, we're talking about vampirism tonight, so it'll be a nice.
Yeah. Well, let me go in here and welcome our guest for the evening. You may know him on the internet as RKDM. You may have watched his streams. You may be familiar with his work. But here we just call him Russell. Russell, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on once again. It's always good to talk to you guys.
Oh, hey.
Geekdom.
Yeah, not a problem. We've been looking forward to chatting with you, not only because you have an amazing voice, but also you are into all manner of things that I am super interested in. So I'm more than happy to have those conversations. So before we get into that, I want to get into the shameless plug section of this. For those of you that don't know, didn't hear us last week or the weeks before, we do have a bunch of things going on. Currently, we have our Kickstarter up for Eneron Adventures Volume 2. Doc, what do we know about this? What do you want to say about this?
We have a great set of adventures spanning from all levels. There's a 1 to 3 Briny Botel, little murder mystery action. You got a little 4 to 6 Misty Tower, kind of a mystery astral plane projection kind of thing. You have a underground lost upper level, what's it, 7 to 10, what's that one called, Dark Escape,
I believe so.
Meet some strange subterranean creatures. Then we move into our Titan's Peak, which is sort of the discover some, I don't know, techno futuristic steampunks. I don't know, it's crazy, it's really cool. And then the Rise of the Raven Lord, running into the dark netherworlds of Eneron, the Scourge.
Okay.
Then, I think I went out of order, didn't I?
Well, that's okay.
I messed up, man. And then there's Pillars of Light, which is a cool adventure across some different terrains, and a battle with a dragon, which is kind of always cool.
Well, the game is called Dungeons and Dragons.
That's right. And then it finally tops off with an upper level with a big sort of monster fight, underwater monster fight.
We ran that the other night. We got some stuff to discuss about that. But before I move on, just remember, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Check us out on Facebook at our Kickstarter, like we said, and also on Patreon. You can certainly join and support us there, both the studio and the podcast, and we appreciate it. Now, not to be rude to our guest, Russell, this is the point where we shamelessly plug whatever we had to sell.
That's right.
And since you, sir, are your own product, why don't you go ahead and give us a shameless plug for yourself?
My shameless plug is fairly straightforward, I suppose. I have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/C for channel /RKDM and the number 1 on the end of that. And my Twitch channel is Rollstream, so it's twitch.tv/Rollstream. I'm going to stick this stuff along with some other links, including my blog, in the chat right now.
All right, yeah, please do.
And don't forget, you can find them at Dungeon Studios Discord, too. So remember, that's also a nice way to kind of sneak in and find them if you can't catch up with the links. But I'm sure our engineer is going to drop links for you as well, so you'll be able to catch up. And don't forget, we're dungeonstudio.co if you want to find us on the web, too. Find our first volume modules.
Yeah, as well as the Eneron Chronicle and some other little goodies in there. So one final shameless plug. I wanted to throw this out there. One of my local nerds, listener of the podcast, friend of the show, an all-around awesome guy, Owen, has really come through heavy for us on our Kickstarter. Absolutely. So, Owen, if you're listening, buddy, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. He may not be listening live, but I'm sure he'll catch up with us at some point in time. Just so you know, it's people like you that make us want to make the show because we're poor and you give us money. So thank you very much. Never going to turn away free cash.
Yeah, and again, all those Facebook groups that we're able to share us out and don't have any problems with sharing us out, helping spread the word of the game. Thank you very much as well. It's super appreciated. Really appreciated.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big thing. One of the things that we've been talking about leading up to the Kickstarter and just in general is how much supporting independent developers and indie game studios really helps everyone. Normally, I'd get
creators, man, and independent creators like Russell, who's really doing it. We talk about this in all our shows about professional DMs, and he's the real deal right here. And we're glad to have him with us, man.
Thank you very much.
And I'm definitely going to pick your brain about a few 100,000 things. But before we do that, a quick bit of shit I forgot. Last week I didn't bitch at all about how much I hate Wizards of the Coast, so let me go ahead and throw that out there now. I don't like them. I also don't like much of anything. That's the whole shtick. But I am happy to say that I've seen some stuff supporting the fact that they're not going to leave third-party creators high and dry with D&D 1 or D&D 5e. That makes me feel a little bit better as a longtime Magic fan and player. I'm not a fan of what they're doing to the game and local game stores. So at least there's some comfort in knowing that they're not going to totally leave us out in the dark. At least we hope. So I only half hate them this week. I guess that's what I'll say.
I'm a little upset with the Yahtzee, man. That bothers me. Have you seen the Yahtzee?
What are you talking about?
No.
Oh my God, Dungeons and Dragons Yahtzee. Okay.
Oh Christ.
So now you get six-sided dice, but instead of numbers, right? One side's a mimic, one side's an owl bear, I forget what all this. All right, enough of that. I don't want to.
I think I just want to say fuck off.
Yeah, I just want to.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was at my wit's end with them when I saw the little Transformers. I'm like, don't get me wrong, look, capitalism wins. You got to make a buck, and I get it. I definitely get it. But yeah, I look at that shit. I'm like, dude, that's just stuff we don't need. We don't need that. So
stop it.
But
stop it.
Yeah, please, and thank you. To paraphrase and steal from Ricky Gervais, Wizards of the Coast, come up here, collect your cash, and go fuck right off. Nobody wants to hear about what you got going on. With that being said, hey, Doc and I have already given our nerd cred numerous times, but Russell, since you are our guest, and I think have a litany of nerd credits to your name, I want to turn the floor over to you. Please tell the 0 people on the internet listening to us, or 4, or 1 million, who knows.
Well,
let them know.
I got to interject because I think Engineer Josh is going to play Russell's video.
No, that's I have that as the start of our intermission, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So I don't want him to give any spoilers to his.
Well, I know what's in that video, so I won't spoil the video.
All right, cool. All right.
So who you are, how the hell you doing, and how you do it?
Who am I and what am I doing? Well, okay. Well, very simply, I used to be a filmmaker. I used to my self-concept as filmmaker, and I did a reasonable amount of acting. I've taught acting. I've got a degree in writing and directing for film and television and shit like that. I used to do a lot of reenactment stuff and LARPing, like Vampire the Masquerade LARPing and that sort of thing. I've spent some time in China and America. I live in New Zealand. I was born in Papua New Guinea. I'm a professional dungeon master now. I work for a company called Questbook here in New Zealand, and I run about 6 campaigns a week, and I stream about 4 of them now. One of them is just with actors, which is our Vaingate Chronicles campaign. It's all set in the world of Sidariel, which is a homebrew world that I've created with a kind of eye on the idea that eventually it will become a Kickstarter. My interests basically at the moment are 5th edition and Vampire the Masquerade, which I'm learning 5th edition Masquerade, but I'm running 2nd edition Masquerade at the moment because 5th edition is quite complicated. So I don't know, does that kind of summarize in a fairly short space? I suppose besides that there's my YouTube channel and my Twitch channel, which I'm always pushing. Go and sign up on my YouTube channel because we need more viewers.
I was going to say, we can tell that you're a professional because you managed to get not 1 but 2 sets of shameless plugs in. right to start the show. So good work, sir. All right, so we're sticking to some of our usual kind of formatting. So we got the nerd cred out of the way. Everyone's waiting to hear what you got to say about stuff. So let's begin this week's visit to the doctor's office. Doc, what do you got for us?
Well, first, I want to give another shameless plug, and this one is for everybody to go out and donate blood while we're talking about vampires. I myself have to receive hemoglobin from donors because of my immunoglobulin levels and due to autoimmune issues. So remember, get out there and give blood if you can. People really need it. That's what kind of got me involved back into the game. Running games for my chronic folk. I'll run another plug for myself. And I think it's important that everybody knows that it's really, really needed. And we're talking about vampires, so why not give some blood? But this week in the doctor's office, magical Q&A. What I wanted to talk about was magical stones from folklore and magical rocks. Okay, and this yeah, go ahead.
No, I was really concerned for a second when you talked about health and wellness and stones that this was going to take a totally different course. But you're talking about magic stones, so let's keep going.
Magic stones.
All right. No, but it really started with a discussion about monoliths. All right, and when we talk about monoliths, and you talk about different geography landforms, right? In America, you have Monument Valley, right? And we refer to those monuments as monoliths, right? But technically, I guess you can use that term monolith. So I sort of dove into this whole thing, what's the difference between a monolith and a megalith? And it really got very, very interesting. And then that led me into ley lines. All right. So first, let's talk about monoliths. When you talk about a monolith, think about 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? One single large black, block of stone, and it's usually massive. Now, a megalith is made up of many monoliths, all right, put together, large stones all put together into some kind of structure. Sometimes it's a building, sometimes it's a table or an altar. So it was kind of interesting when you talk about these in your games. How do you interject these into your games? It can really be a neat kind of encounter other than a monster encounter. So that's why I thought I wanted to bring it up. The other thing about it, and I put it to both of you guys to see what you know about these things. When we talk about different stones, there are different types of stone alignments, and we call them ley lines. Russell, are you familiar with any of this?
Oh, I'm familiar with all of this.
All right, so I'll get to Russell in a minute because I know Russell's like chomping a little bit over there. So there's different stone alignments, stone circles, effigy mounds, petriform sites. I mean, all the different types of rock formations, ancient burial mounds. My research just got intense, and I was like, wow, I could do this, and I could do this, and I could do this. And I read one in the States that really got me, this Cherokee Indian site, where supposedly this beautiful Cherokee princess had died. All these Native Americans had piled stones there for her. And then if anyone was to take stones away, they would befall bad luck. And supposedly it's really been happening. That people, they heard about it, from occult sites and went and got rocks and then took them. And then bad things befell these people that took these rocks. So they had to take the rocks back. And it's so immense to me, the whole idea about all of this type of stuff. And to bring it into your games, I think is really, really an exciting thing to do. So I put that to both of you guys. If you know anything about it, you want to talk about it.
Sure.
Go ahead, Russell. What do you know? I'm intrigued to hear.
Well, I mean, the subject generally is of great interest to me. My whole ethos, and one of my issues with D&D basically is that what they've done is they've taken a whole bunch of what is essentially pagan lore, and they've rewritten it in a way that has, on the one hand, kind of dumbed it down. On the other hand, they've turned certain things into more popularized things, and they've gotten away from the essence in many cases of the archetypes that are behind a lot of the stuff.
Yes.
So I mean, yeah, so for me D&D as a DM, I'm busy trying to cut the signal from the noise in regards to that, which is why I exclude a certain number of races and creatures and magic and so on in my games. And people are like, why are you doing this? Well, no, we want all these things. And then I go about explaining it. I've got a blog on this subject, actually, called Mythic Role-Playing, where I talk about a lot of this stuff. Anyway, just to sort of stick more to the question of what you're talking about, I do use monoliths specifically in my games, especially in Sidariel, which is based on there's a sort of 30,000-year-old Ostorian culture that once lived in this world. And that it has collapsed, and all of their ruins have been left behind. And amongst those things are everything from teleporting type circles and standing stones and that type of stuff, through to artifacts that have been left behind, sort of embedded in the world, which kind of creates a plethora of opportunities for adventurers, if you like.
Right. I mean, that's Harlan Ellison, threw that in that Star Trek episode. So they could jump through the portal, so they could go back in time, even though they were already in outer space.
Right.
Monolith is what brings it to that, archaic level.
Right. Well, I mean, and if you look at the sort of cultural background of where monoliths come from and what that's all about, it's kind of it comes from a solar phallic religion, basically. It's light and extension, and so it's very much about the formation of the universe and the core of even consciousness, if you want to get really into it.
And that's true. As I was looking at the different types of stones, the different phallicized symbols and the different ones for fertility,
right?
Ones that are used all throughout Europe that people would bring their family members to in the true belief that this is going to bring about fertility to their family.
Right. And I think that one of the things I think with D&D, I find it with a lot of players, is they come into it and they've brought all of their own preconceptions from the real world, and they're trying to force those preconceptions onto characters that don't exist in the real world. They exist in their own world, and they've already got that. There is I find that players, unlike actors, players tend to find things in their own lives and force them onto the game, which, I mean, look, this is fine. There's nothing wrong with this, okay? I'm just talking about it from an extraordinarily anally retentive and self-righteous point of view. But
like you do.
But when players try and force exterior circumstances from the real world into the game, I find that quite obnoxious, to be honest. And when they, on the other hand, they dig into the lore of the world and they start to look at ways that their character might integrate with it, in ways that are consistent with the world, that are thematically connected to the world, that have historical connections to the world, that sort of thing. I find that much more gratifying. I love it when players come up with their own language or design things. Like one of my players a while ago, who funnily enough was an actor, he had a character. He created a little ritual for the game, like it was a greeting between certain types of elves, where they say love, light, liberty, and life, something like that. I can't remember exactly how it went, but
right.
Little things like that, little ritual details that you could throw in there and add to the characters and to the adventure or the mood. I'm just rambling now.
No, it's first of all. This is hypnotic. You can ramble as long as you want, but I'm actually furiously making notes. There's a ton of stuff from what you've said. Let me go through my list quickly. I wish you were here for our conversation a couple weeks back discussing, the idea of Wizards bringing on a cultural consultant after some of the recent fiascos. And the two main points that I had made were one, while there are certainly terrible people out there, obviously what you bring to the game is, that's on you. Your baggage is your problem, which is exactly what you're saying. People are trying to do this. And there's a lot for newer players. Typically what you get are those pseudo avatar characters. It's all the things they want to be. It's them, but with superpowers, essentially.
Yeah, it's a sort of a power trip, basically.
Right. And then eventually, as players ascend in the tiers of gameplay, they usually get away from that, but it's hard for a lot of people to remember in real time to make the choice the character would, not the choice that they would. So spot on with that observation. You certainly are a master of your craft, sir.
Well, it's I don't know. It's hard for new players, especially because they don't. I mean, look, if you've been an actor and you've done any training in acting, you've probably done some Shakespeare. You've probably had some. I don't know. You've probably come into contact with the idea that you're going to be playing a character that's not you, and that you probably need to do some character research for that. One of the things I love about role playing is that every character is an opportunity for research. And you can learn so much doing that.
Well, I think that's true. Absolutely. And I was thinking about that, as a DM, I think about all these different things you can add, you do research for, but as a player, you definitely also need to go out and research what you're playing. That makes sense.
I'm just going to dump a link
absolutely.
in the chat here. I'm just going to dump a link in here for a blog called Mythic Role Playing, which pretty much is my opinion on the matter. But
wonderful, and I want to dig into that a bit. I will point out that one of the things that you said that I'm sure will send shockwaves through all the youngins that play the game is you have restrictions of choice in your game to fit the lore and theme of the game. How dare you, sir? How dare you?
That's right. You're not going to play your bard, wizard, loxodon, monk, fucking hybrid, whatever the fuck. No, you're not. It's not going to happen. No. The basic core of my belief system about role-playing and D&D is that here are a bunch of archetypes that have been given to you on a platter in the player's handbook, and before you've even finished exploring the first two of them, you want to run off and play some subclass of a class that has nothing to do. You're just diluting it. You're taking the cordial, the fucking wine, the pure sauce, and you're diluting it to the point where it's barely recognizable and has no connection to the human condition, no connection to the archetypes that they originally were there for, and you're going to learn nothing about anything from doing that. And maybe you'll have fun, and I hope you do. That's my hope for you.
It goes right back
you're good.
Role playing. It goes right back to mythic role playing and not arcade stocking.
Right.
Like you're playing an arcade game and you're trying to get all the features looking at like a computer program.
The gimmicks.
Yeah. Now I think go ahead.
No, that's all.
No, I was gonna say. So I assume. So one of the things we brought up before, it's a statement that I say all the time, is that there are no boring characters. There are only boring players, and I hear that a lot. Well, I don't want to play that because it's boring. Like, well, it's only boring because you let it be boring.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you can give me a fucking the most basic character. Give me a champion, a human
fighter champion.
Right.
The basic bitch of D&D.
I will do something with that character that you have not seen before. That's the point. That's where the role playing comes in. You don't need it. Your race is not your character. Your class is not your character, and your inventory is most definitely not your fucking character. Okay?
Yeah, that was from a mechanical standpoint. I concede the point that mechanically there are some classes that are less mechanically interesting as far as what you can do, but I agree with you 100%. If you're an old school gamer like I am, and I've had this, Doc has had the pleasure of meeting some of my original home game people, and my friend Jamie the Alpha Beard, as I lovingly refer to him, is, we argue about this all the time because I'm a low magic Tolkien style, very lore heavy, and things have to make sense, right? and his mindset is different than mine. God bless him; he can enjoy himself, and I love having the arguments. But in older editions of D&D, your character, there was very little mechanically different between the classes and races, minimal, anyways. It was the magic items you found that were the big mechanical changes to your character. And now in 5th edition, they have switched that paradigm. Your character has, oodles and oodles of abilities at level 0 that make you basically a god.
That is very true.
Yeah. And the items aren't that important.
Right.
But the thing that I have tried to stress forever to everyone, as I teach people the game, teach people how to DM, is this idea that those things are not your character. It's not. I'm like, yes, I certainly have stories about the time somebody used an item or an ability in a crazy way. Our play test last night, one of the guys that Doc hooked us up with shapeshifted into a water elemental, and then at a critical moment, it's like, hey, can I just sneak into the shark's belly and heal people because I can do this as a druid? I'm like, that's a really good idea. So there are certainly cool things that come from that, but at the end of the day, if that's all your character is, then, I mean, first of all, you're only interesting during combat at that point, because that's when most of the abilities are, and you're missing out on everything else in the game, and most of my favorite memories and stories are about interactions between people and characters, things that happened, and I love those little bits of being surprised by things as well.
Some of the best games, in my opinion, some of the best games, if not the best games, are usually non-combat games, to be honest. Yeah. The games between the combat sessions. It's the game where the player characters bawl their eyes out. The players bawl their eyes out because the intensity of the scenario that has arisen.
It's interesting. We said our topic tonight was going to be vampires and Ravenloft, and looking at that module, that originally came out in '83. Yeah. That was the module. Now, Merwin, you just said, there wasn't much difference in the beginning between the characters, right? But when you played that module in '83 with those 1E characters, that's when we all looked at each other like, oh my God, we're not just in a dungeon crawl anymore. We have to play we're just looking at the vampire's dungeon right now. Like, we have to figure out what we're doing. Now, us as role players, we had played other games, so we were comfortable in that role, playing that way. But I could see how it's kind of grown. And that's what I was saying before, Russell. I was kind of saying how when you're playing a vampire game, it's kind of different than playing 5e.
1,000%. I actually have a great segue. I got a great segue that's going to get us into our main topic. If I can throw out 2 more things really quick. So, Russell, you had mentioned in your homebrew the depth of the lore going back to a civilization 30,000 years before. That is wonderful. I've said in here before, one of the things that a lot of day one DMs fail to do is they don't have that depth. And I remember being a teenage DM, coming in at the end of first edition AD&D into second. Dungeons were there because they had to be. There was never any thought or lore. There's no deeper meaning to that. And I think that there's a lot of. I know some people complain about too much lore, and I'm a lore whore, so I love that shit. Some people complain about it, but it's those little details, that little thing, that breathes a life into the game, that makes it more than quest givers and relevant information for the plot. That actually is like, I feel like I'm part of a world. So I commend you on that. Now my transition point though. It's a bit of a philosophical question that will segue right into why you think Vampire is the best game ever, or at least why it's one of the games that you run and that you stream.
No, it is the best game ever.
See, I figured. I was just throwing. I didn't know that was your opinion, but I was throwing it out there, just assuming. So I have a philosophy about modern gamers versus older gamers, different generations. The idea is this. That the hero narrative for the modern generation of gamers and consumers of media, the hero narrative is dead. When we started when we were younger, it was a heroic fantasy game. You were going to be the heroes. So, you know, the age-old basic plot hooks of somebody runs into the inn, says, help me, my house is on fire, the orcs are attacking, was all it really took. And then as media has evolved and the generations have shifted, you went from heroes to anti-heroes, and that's where you get the rise of characters in popular stuff like Deadpool, those kind of characters in the games where everybody wanted to be them. That's if you remember Drist, the drow in the 90s, that was every person I played with wanted to make a not evil anymore dark elf ranger who definitely is not a clone of Drist. But I get it.
Definitely not.
No, but now that we are into the modern era, though, it is I see this time and time again in games. The people come to the table and it's a gaggle of random freaks randoming about because they don't seem to be motivated the same way. They don't seem to be interested in the hero narrative.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you have there, the hero narrative. I mean, the thing is, curiously enough, we've been through this before, I feel, because we had first and second edition D&D, and then we got the third edition, and somewhere in that sort of period, Vampire the Masquerade came out, along with 100 other games. Mm-hmm. And for a period of time, D&D, don't let anybody hear me say this, was fucking dead.
It was.
It was. Nobody played D&D. It was the worst game. We literally thought it was the dumbest game out of all of the role-playing games that there were. It was the oldest, but also the dumbest. It had things like alignment and Vancian spell slots and levels and all of this other nonsense that doesn't make any fucking sense.
You are tickling my nerd right there with those terms, friend.
Right. And then D&D goes along with all this stuff. They're like, let's do a third edition. Okay, so they just make it more complicated and more number crunching and more kind of basically a board game on legs. Meanwhile, we've got other role-playing games in that period emerging, like Vampire the Masquerade, for example, that has mechanics that are designed for role-playing. Oh my God, there's a fucking idea, isn't it? Why don't you design your mechanics for role-playing instead of a board game? Like, I mean, D&D came out of wargaming, right? So its mechanics are fundamentally wargaming mechanics.
Yeah, it is. It's very true.
Masquerade's mechanics come fundamentally from storytelling. Thusly, the entire system is built from the ground up for storytelling. Consequently, you have much better mechanics that make a lot more sense. You don't have silly shit like alignment. Instead, you have things like nature and demeanor, whereby your nature is who you really are, and your demeanor is who you portray yourself as. And then you choose archetypes that are supposed to be polarized in order to create internal conflict.
Imagine that. So my segue question was going to be, is that you already answered the question, but was that a draw for you in getting into Vampire and deciding that was going to be the system? The fact that it is 1,000% storyteller driven.
To be fair, I didn't actually know many of these things when I first got into Vampire. I was only about 18 when I got into Vampire, and to put things in perspective, I'm 45 now, so it was a while ago. And I was much less developed as a dungeon master or as an artist or any kind of storyteller. At that point, I was just like, wow, this is cool. And, I picked up a book called The Book of the Damned. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but it's an old second edition Vampire the Masquerade book. There is not one single reference in that book to the fact that it is part of a game. And so I read this book going, wow, what the hell is this shit? It's talking about all these clans and vampires. It's got these letters in it from vampires to other vampires and all of these documents. It looks like someone's compiled a whole bunch of stuff from real life and stuck it in a book, and they've let out this whole conspiracy, and they've just published it. It's got the masquerade and all of the traditions are in there and so on. It's like, here's all the lore of the vampire world, but no mechanics at all. So I didn't even know it was a game when I first came across it. And then I found out it was a live role-playing game. And I thought, wow, that's very cool. I played a game where there were 80 people dressed up as vampires, hanging out at a university, actually. And we were all live gaming. And there was, like, very little combat. But it was the most exciting and interesting role-playing I'd done to that point.
That sounds so intense, dude. You must have found it like it was like a Necronomicon for you. It was like, oh my god, look at all this vampire stuff, and then you showed up and there's like 80 people there all.
Yeah, it was pretty mind blowing, you know. And I haven't seen an event that big since then. I did make a short documentary about vampire live role playing back in the 90s, 2000, I think it was. But anyway, it's a shitty documentary. You shouldn't watch it. The sound is terrible.
that has a charm all its own, friend.
I was going to say, have you heard our podcast? Have you heard our podcast?
Yeah, this I will say, this is the first. We started late, but this is the first one that we didn't have some major catastrophe to begin with. Once we hit the button, so it seems to be going okay. I had a similar a couple of things. So I had a similar experience with the LARPing. I am way too cool to be that level of nerd, as far as anyone knows. I love that shit. The idea of it, anyways. And we're the same vintage, Russell. So when I went to Gen Con in 93 and 95, and the first year that I went to the big gaming convention, I was going through the hall at like 11:30. Everything was closed down. And the place we were at in Wisconsin, it had a second tier, and it had a big... I think rotunda is the proper word. A big round chamber with a second story of it.
Mezzanine.
Whatever. But I walked through there and found myself just in a cacophony of fucking madness. People talking, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, but it seemed like it was organized. And then I found out later on that was one of the many vampire LARPs going on, and that was actually the Malkavian Moot. For that convention. So everyone there was in character as a crazy person.
Now,
you had that.
Have you heard of One World by Night?
I have not.
Okay, so One World by Night, at one point, they had about 5,000 members, across the world. And they had storytellers in different countries all around the world running games set in the same milieu, in the same universe, basically. So that, I could be playing a character here in New Zealand, in Auckland, and I could get on a plane and fly over to Los Angeles, and then I could play in their game, and it would still be part of the same world. So things I did would affect the world. And so you had, 5,000 players existing in the same vampire world of darkness. It was pretty cool. They had to coordinate all of that shit, of course, and they had a lot of websites.
These are LARPers, like they're physically going that place to play in the game, right?
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and I would do that on occasion. I would drive to other cities and towns to go and hang out in their games and what have you. And lots of other people did it more so than I did, because I live in one of the main cities here. But yeah, you get people moving around between games. It's kind of like, I guess, like Eneron in a sense. You've got different DMs running the same world.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Except this is what LARP.
Yeah. I mean, in the initial one of the initial ideas with art when RPGs began, the idea was that you'd create the game, then it would travel around at conventions and people would come to play, but you didn't have groups per se. You had a DM who had a dungeon, and people came to his game. That's you went to his dungeon. It was Grom's dungeon. It was Doc's dungeon. It wasn't you get 4 or 5 people and you stay together. With one DM and one group, people would join other games, go to conventions. That's how it. One of the ways that it started. I don't think it was until a few years in that people started to there was enough people that you started to kind of get away from that. But that's where you get like the West Marches style game and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So
that's right.
Yeah. So with the philosophical question about the the hero narrative and whatnot, one of the things I'm interested in about not just your live stream stuff in vampire games, but I'm interested in the process. We had done a thing about world building and story creation on an earlier episode, and I'm curious. So knowing that in vampire, you don't have the party, you don't have the adventure like per se, and you don't have that hero narrative. You have individual stories being woven in this tapestry of a much larger world. How do you build that as a game master? What do you do? What's your process for that?
I'll tell you what has evolved for me, and this is over a period of playing Vampire for like 30 years now. I have my games run around a concept. I invented this faction within the world called the Order of the Temple of Mars. And for most part, my players play characters who are members of the Order of the Temple of Mars. The Order of the Temple of Mars is headed by a Methuselah vampire named Mardon, who is actually Romulus from Roman lore. And the player characters, basically, they become bloodbound to this order, bloodbound to each other, and so they kind of have to work together. And when players start characters in any of my games, actually, whether it's D&D or Vampire, the first thing I say to them is that I am expecting you to make a character that can work with the rest of the group. Right, that's the most basic thing. If you can't work with the rest of the group, you haven't made a character for this game, basically. If it's D&D, you need to be heroes that can work with each other, and if it's Vampire, you have to have reasons to have relationships and be able to work together and not just kill each other. And so working that out in session 0 is quite a good plan, in my opinion. Figuring out how your players are going to justify the fact that they're working together and they're not just ripping everything apart and trying to kill each other. And
that's a big key to any game. Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And Vampire is particularly bad like that. I've heard a lot of horror stories, and I don't mean horror stories in the good sense, where people have had experiences of Masquerade and they've been bad because you've had players who are treating it like, well, just fairly inconsiderately, to be honest, where, you know, they'll get a new player in and they'll just beat them up with all of the lore and all of the background that player doesn't know and abuse the situation. And that's not on, in my view. You know, the people are coming into a game to have fun. Then we all have to agree on the type of fun that we're going to have from the beginning. Otherwise, we're possibly going to be running at odds with each other and someone's not going to have fun. So, you know, that's how I do it, basically.
Let me ask you a question. Like, I know in D&D you would say, like, yo, like, this guy's a murder hobo. We don't need him in our party. What do you call a person in Masquerade who throws the party off? You don't call him a murder hobo. What do you? Is there a?
Well, to be honest, I think that the D&D terms are still so ubiquitous that
they get
we
used.
Probably do just call them murder hobos. Very few people come into any of my games that act like that because I kind of vet them a little bit. And I mean, there are people that come in that, I don't know, I've had different problems. Because people often are paying for my games. In most cases, they're paying for the session. And so they have a little bit of, I guess, you know, when you're paying for something, you feel a little bit entitled to it.
Well, yeah, and there is something about when you're paying, you're a customer, and the service delivered. Yeah, I see that point. Yeah, it makes sense.
And then you get players that think that if they're paying for it, well, they can pay just a bit more and just get some extra services, and maybe then they'll get extra experience points, and then they'll get, you know, better treatment, and then next, I don't know. I've had players that have this strange assumption that the more money they throw at me, the more I'm going to give them in the game, which is entirely wrong, by the way.
Yeah, that's not going to.
You cannot impress me with money. I mean, I'll take your money, but
I was going to say, you should keep that secret. It's just like, if you know, in a D&D game, if you build a character whose parents are alive, don't tell the DM that because it guarantees they'll get murdered.
Right.
Never share the secret.
That's it. I mean, look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, actually, and to answer your question as fully as possible, if you have time for this.
Of course.
I have a document that I give to people. I'll just read you some of it because it's. Okay. Let me find it first. So you just talk for a minute while I find this document.
And I have to say, Russell was talking. I was watching his nerd cred video that we're going to see in a little bit, and one of the things he talks about briefly is about role playing getting used for education. And I was kind of intrigued to ask him about if he knows anything about that in New Zealand.
Well, I can vouch for the fact that there are a lot of things that I, as a high school student, completely uninterested in stuff in class. There was a lot that I learned. Obviously, you get quick at math. Your reading comprehension goes up. Your creativity goes up, at least hopefully it would. And can go both ways. If you're a math nerd, you know, you can build those skills up. If you're creative, you can build those skills up. And then obviously you used to have a lot of that good mythology, like the legend and lore books, which was actual historical mythology, which got me through more than a few tests in history classes. So,
yeah,
Right.
I'd say my knowledge of Egyptian mythology got me through a few papers, eh?
see, yeah, there you go.
So, okay, I found the document. This is the Vampire the Masquerade character creation notes outline that I've basically put out. And what it basically says, this is an open world sandbox campaign expected to last as long as you want it to. Blah, blah, blah. The more you put in, the more you get out. Basically, the more proactive you are in the sandbox, the more agency you will be given. The more you sit on your hands, the more likely it is that I will railroad you into the story. And
that is a great way to put that.
Yeah, I think in that too. That's awesome. This is great.
Right. So my GM philosophy is the illusion of total agency.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Make the players think they have agency. You give them the sensation of agency, but they don't ever have agency. That's, I mean, they do. They do, actually. They have some agency, but far less than they think they do. But the trick is to convince them that they have entire agency. The rest is smoke and mirrors.
Well, I think the thing is they have agency with your approval.
Yeah.
I think that's always the thing. We've been talking about this every game, and you've said this since the beginning, is you talk to your player from zero. Where what do you want to do, and where you want to go, and that's why you don't have murder hobos.
Well, here, so my philosophy on that I've come to is you try to explain to players that the reality that this is from my I just did this the first time with my current weekly group, is I put out a document like that with kind of here's how I run shit. My idea was always this: the world exists in spite of you, not because of you. If you hear the rumor that there is a dragon that lives up on the hill and you go up there, I don't care if you're level 1 or 20, there's a dragon that lives up there. If that's what the world calls for, that's the reality of it. And then I explain to people that, the way the world works is sometimes you do things to the world, sometimes the world is going to do things to you. That's just the way it works. You're not exempt from the clock, from the passage of time, or from the backdrop of events. And then as far as the railroad part goes, and the agency thing, I'd heard this explained, and I think this is the best version of it that I've heard, and that I use it now. The players don't have agency to determine what and how things happen. They have agency within those events, though, to figure out how they resolve it. So they don't decide that the orcs attack the town. They don't. We use vampire terms. They don't decide that one of the players is going to get set up and have a blood hunt called on them.
Right.
They don't set that up, but they certainly choose how they resolve that, and that is where their agency comes in. Is you can do whatever you want to try to fix the problem in whatever way you want, but the problem is still the problem. It still happened.
Right. Well, look, I mean, another little trick that I like to do is that I like to start my sessions, my vampire campaigns, so to speak, as humans. Everybody's playing a human at session 0, right? You don't need character sheets. You're just going to be playing a human. But basically, over the next 3 sessions, you're likely to become embraced by possibly a clan that we've talked about out of game or what have you. But you have to make a character that is going to be a vampire, that is going to be interesting to a vampire, to be made into a vampire. If you follow what I'm...
Yeah. No, makes sense.
Right. Some character types are more likely to be made into retainers or ghouls or just used as blood bags. So make a fucking interesting character. That's what I'm saying, Make a character with human problems, human relationships, and humanity. I personally strongly discourage law enforcement type backgrounds, investigators, marines, special forces, ninjas, super spies, etc. Look, you can if you really want to, but I'd rather you played a nanny or a bus driver or a barista or a law student or a dog walker or a lonely Walmart manager with a poodle and a stomach ulcer. That would be perfect, right?
That's so true. I remember back in the day we played Mask of the Red Death, which is sort of that 1890s, and my favorite character was just a doctor whose pregnant wife had been killed by a wagon accident, and he was a tragic alcoholic, and I loved playing that character. Like, I could really dig into the whole character.
Right. And you could explore an aspect of the human condition.
Yeah, and how his sorrow and where he would go with it and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Complete.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
No.
I mean,
it
but
is,
at the same time, if you're one of these people that just really want some pure, overpowered escapism, you can do that in Vampire. In fact, Vampire is great for that too.
Right.
And in fact, I would argue that there is a balance to be had between the sort of edgelord vampire character and this more interesting character, where one transitions into the other, and that transformation is a character arc with character development and some plot points, and some story. And look at that, you've actually got a story now because you've got a character arc. You know, where if you start with everything, there's nowhere to go. I mean, the only thing you can do with that is, I guess, what D&D does, which is, oh, here's a level. You've just leveled up. You wake up, and now you've got 10 new spells. You can hit harder and faster. You can hit twice now, and you've got some new stuff. You just woke up with that because you killed a monster yesterday. It doesn't make any sense. But
no, 100%. That's one of the reasons I was, I'm one. Good morning. How is everyone? I need more coffee. Clearly, we're getting near break time, but
right.
No, it's one of the things that I was interested in, asking you about, because I'm a forever DM, but I got invited to a group. I haven't been kicked out of there yet, but I think that's going to be I think that might be my story for the break, or I might do a ghost story. I'm not sure, since we're talking about these things, but. So I got invited to a game, and we've switched a few systems. We did Cthulhu, and now the guys wanted to test out a vampire kind of module that he made. And I'm interested, like I said, I was really interested in kind of the setup, how you structure the game and the stories, and what devices and contrivances you use to build that kind of story. And I like what you're saying about having that character development. So let me ask you a final point before we get into tonight's story and go to our break here in a few minutes. When it comes to that, when it comes to players, building and having a story arc, right? Do you let them develop it? Do you, and kind of hands off? It's your world, obviously, so you have final say, so they don't break the verisimilitude or whatnot.
Right.
But if a player is has stuff, do you let them take the wheel 100%? Is it always collaborative for you? And you already had said, if you sit on your hands, then the bus is going to hit you as it drives on through town. But what's your approach to that? One of the things we talked about before was again, day one DM mistake that I made. It was my precious world, and it was perfect, and nobody could add anything to it. And then I realized how silly that was as I got older. And some of the best stuff I have in my setting, and best games I've had, and best characters people have played, came out of that collaboration. So for Vampire, for your people, and you have paid players, so it's a little bit of a different experience. But where do you fall on that spectrum when you just in general?
Right. This is a great question, and I still have difficulty with this a lot, actually. Like, for example, in Sidariel, which is my homebrew campaign world, I'm very precious about it, and I have to actively let go sometimes to let players fulfill their dreams, their wishes, their hopes for their characters and what have you. Someone comes to me and says, I had a group, here's an example, I had a group come to me and they were like, we want to play Minotaurs. Fuck off. And then I thought about it, and I thought, you know what, fuck it, they want to play Minotaurs.
That's my friend Jamie in every D&D game he can.
They wanted to play Minotaurs, and I thought, well, you know what? It's going to take me 20 minutes to come up with a Minotaur village, draw them a little map, come up with some lore for some Minotaurs in the world of Sidariel. I sat down, I did that, and I was reasonably happy with it. And I think they were pretty happy with it, too. I mean, we had a pretty cool little storyline about this. There's like one village somewhere in the deserts near Saxaline beyond Kurgasiax.
Yeah, it's kind of a neat little story you built there. Yeah, it's cool.
Right, so you built a story out of it, and that's the thing. If you want to play, I don't know, name a fucking weird ass race, an Aarakocra, for example, I mean, to be honest, I don't like Aarakocra, but you know, if you really, really, really want to play one, and to be honest, if you're paying me money to play one, I'm fine. Okay, you're playing a Aarakocra now, but it's still going to fit into the world, and we're going to have a conversation about how this Aarakocra either got to the world or where this tribe of Aarakocra have been residing for the last 10,000 years, and nobody has noticed them. You know, this type of stuff. Lizard folk, they exist in my world, but I don't encourage players to play them. But if they really go out of their way to play a lizard folk, I do have ideas about how they can be integrated. Specifically with your question, though, about how much do I collaborate, I try to collaborate as much as I can on everything. And I make offers. I don't make hard and fast, here's what's going to happen with your character. I say, so do you think maybe your character is like this? Do you think maybe your character's father might have been a noble or something, and maybe they had an artifact that went missing? Would that work for you? And the player will come back and say, yeah, that sounds cool, yeah. Or well, no, I'm really thinking more along this other line, you know. And so it's a conversation, communicate your needs.
And it's interesting. And that goes all the way back to Merwin, what I was saying to you when I work with the Girl Scouts that have never played before. Well, what do you want to be? Well, what do you want your character to do? You really let them explore what their needs are and what they want to explore in the game.
Although there are definitely times when you got to clamp that shit down. I've had a few negative experiences with players over the years. I had one that I don't want to go into all of my thoughts on it, but we had a moment where they were playing this kind of country bumpkin, very innocent, very pure-hearted character. They got into a scenario, and where they were kind of caught out, and then in a panicked moment, the guy's like, the guy's like, well, I'll kill the guy who saw me, and I'm like, really? Like, I mean, that's. You haven't done anything like that so far. Maybe I'll knock him out. No, I'll just kill him. I'm like, okay. And then I try to have the conversation afterwards. I say, look, I was unexpected. I like the direction that could go, and here are my thoughts on how your class and then your character, based on what you've said so far, how I think you might react. What do you think about that? And he goes, I don't think I really cared about killing him. And I'm like, that is not in keeping with the character you've been playing. He goes, I'm fine with it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's sort of inconsistent play.
Yeah. And that was the beginning of the end of that. So, all right. Well, hey, I am loving this, but I have the bladder of a pregnant woman on meds. So I think we're going to need to take a break here in a second. Before we do that, I want to turn it over to Doc really quick for some more shameless plugs for Dungeon Studios, and if you have any shout outs for the week. And then I will tell a story. I'll leave it up to you guys to pick which one, though. So, Doc, what do we got? Hit me up.
Oh my gosh. Well, I do my crazy Discord surfing, right? So there was another new Discord, Brothers in Gaming, and they do all kinds of gaming. They do video gaming and role play gaming. You can jump in games there. I can't believe what do we have to like 38 Discords now or something.
Are they allowed girls?
What's that?
Are they allowed girls?
I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
It just says brothers. It just says brothers, and it doesn't. There seem to be girl names here.
Right.
I can tell you from experience that doesn't mean anything.
Right. I just thought I'd throw a spanner in there.
Oh, and then I was very disappointed. I did miss the Mammoth monthly Rampage. They're releasing Undead this month. They're doing an Undead collection, and I wanted to kind of peek at their new models before they came out. I missed that, so I was kind of bummed about that.
Well, you got to keep those guys on speed dial, because if we get big, I would not complain about them sculpting custom miniatures. For at least my characters would be awesome to have. So just throwing that out there, just in case anybody you're feeling bored and want to throw us a bone. No, good stuff, man. Good stuff.
That's all I got for you this week. It's been a lot of turkey, and like I said, you guys know that I'm kind of like been quarantined for years. This is my first time out of the house in 3 years. I was able to go visit family, so
That is excellent.
Break from D&D, so it was very nice. A little bit.
No, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. So for everyone listening, before we go to our break, please click like, share, subscribe. If you're listening to us this long live or in your car, wherever, we really appreciate it. Check us out at our website. Check us out on Patreon. Check us out at our Kickstarter. Please give some love and time and attention to our wonderful guest. I can assure you his voice is silky smooth here. It's probably even better when he's running the streams. So it's amazing. We appreciate you being here. Russell, I'm going to give you the option. I've had an interesting 45 years. I can share a ghost story before we go to the break, or I can share one of my many gaming horror stories. What would you like to hear?
I think a gaming horror story sounds.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what's a good one to share. Games I've been kicked out of. There's been a few of those.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Okay.
Have you ever had to kick someone out?
Yeah, I've parted ways with a few people over the years. A lot of that has come because they just really weren't a fit for the game.
Right.
More than really getting a kind of a disastrous play or somebody ruining things. But I will, so here's what I do. I told a story last week about getting a player to quit the game BattleTech and never play again.
Right.
One of my favorite stories. I'm going to tell you what happened to another person in that story. It's a bit of a gaming horror story, if you will. So in my youth as an inexperienced DM, I bought in wholeheartedly to the idea, and I thought I was righteous for doing this, that the game must start with random people who don't know each other, and you all meet in a tavern. However, as a novice, I didn't really have a good idea of how to go from that to anything resembling a party. So we had various levels of success. Now, I tell horror stories. I tell fondly remembered tales. We won't call them horror stories because these are friends of mine. About some of the behaviors and things that people did over the years, all in the service of that's what my character would do, right? So in this particular one, we'd invited a person to join our game. We had a rotating cast of third and fourth party members because the two core guys, we're a little extreme, we shall say. But so we get a player in there. We start with the whole tavern thing, and in the scene, I'm explaining that they're hanging out in the bar. We're playing in Forgotten Realms, Dungeons and Dragons. The characters are all in there, and I had a brilliant idea for how to start things. I was going to have the villains, I was going to have misguided people show up looking for what they call the crown upon the wind. It was a gauntlet they were looking for. I apologize, I'm mixing up two stories. They come into the bar, they scan around, by the power of Torm, the righteous, all will make themselves available. We seek the missing gauntlet. We know it is amongst those here. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be great, right? The players are going to be like, you're not searching me. They're going to band together to protect people. I think they're going to band together and protect people that are being harassed. Or at the very least, they're going to stand up for themselves, and then they will fight together, have to escape together. That's how I think the game is going to go. So I present this to the group, and I go around and I say, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm going to hide in the corner, and I'm not going to let them know that they're bothering me, but I'm ready to run. Okay, what do you want to do? Well, I'm going to get ready with a spell. Okay, what are you doing? He goes, I'm not letting him search me. I'm going to fight him. And I get to one of the newer people, and I go, all right, man, what do you do? He goes, oh, that's easy. I stand up. I point to the weirdo in the back corner, one of my other players, and I go, him! He has it! I saw it! And that's where we're going to leave the story until the second half of our conversation. Thank you guys for sticking around. I hope you wait through the break. I didn't get a time from our producer on how long the videos that we have are. Russell, how long is your thing? Do you know off the top of your head?
I lost his sound.
Oh, did we lose the sound? Oh no, where'd you go, buddy?
7 minutes and 44 seconds.
Okay. All right, and I think we have another devil's recipe from Barry tonight. If producer Josh can confirm that, about 15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to take about a 15-minute break. I'm going to mute the mics. I'm going to go into our intermission screen. Thank you for sticking with us. Please hit like, share, and subscribe. Check out our guest stuff on the internet, RKDM. his various streams and products, please check out Dungeon Studios. We have a Kickstarter going right now for Enron Volume 2 Adventures. One of the big perks for that, for our high tier people, as you can
check out our website dungeonstudios.co. You can get some of our Volume 1 adventures as well.
Yeah. So we have all that. So without further ado, we're going to take a 15-minute or so break, probably a few minutes more, because there's always some catastrophe when we come back from the break, but we're going to try it. Russell, thank you for being here. I can't wait to talk to you on the other half, where I want to chat about the professional side of what you do. I'm very interested in that, and I'm sure people at home are, because it's a new field, if you will. So stick with us, folks.
I also want to hear Russell's pick for favorite horror movie when we come back, too.
Favorite horror movie? Okay.
Yes. All right, cool.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, Internet. We'll be back in 15 or so minutes.
All right.
Enjoy.
Bye. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, elves, dwarves, vampires, divine beings of Sidariel. I have to say that with the number of games I'm running right now, and with our Twitch stream, the Veingate Chronicles, I am exceedingly busy, so our Deafened Condition video is a little bit behind, but I'm working on it. I even have a script, or at least a first draft. This, however, is a quick and dirty Dungeons & Dragons video for you today. This time answering a specific question from one of my real-life players. Shout out to Charlie. You can see one of her games right over here. Sorry, Charlie, this has taken so long. This is a question I've been asked so many times now that I figured I'd make a video and let it speak for itself. How did I get into role-playing and dungeon mastering? Is that a word, dungeon mastering? Or game mastering? Well, unlike certain YouTube DMs who claim to have been DMing since high school, I've been DMing since primary school. Yeah, I started DMing at the ripe age of 10 years old. Now, it's only fair to put a warning on this content, something to the effect of, back in my day, everything was so much harder, and so you kids get off my lawn. And it's true. Let me paint you a picture. The year was 1987, and I was living in a small, fairly remote town called Mount Hagen in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, where my parents worked as teachers for the International Education Agency. The number of Dungeons & Dragons players in this small town was almost zero. The number of shops that sold D&D books and supplements, negative 1,000. Literally none. One day, a friend of mine from England, let's just call him Ben, asked me if I'd like to try and play D&D. As it turned out, Ben did not actually know how to play D&D, nor did he actually really have the right books for it. What he did have, and remember this was 1987, was the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Oriental Adventures book and the Monster Manual 2. That is to say, the supplementary Monster Manual, not the first one. And that's it. Also, one very precious set of dice. Thus, over the next 3 months, from around May till around July, I think, 1987, I guess, we tried to work out Dungeons & Dragons from scratch using just these 2 books. Isolated, alone, cut off from the world in a time before the internet. In the beginning, we made characters. I was a ninja yakuza called Aragorn. Ben was a ninja named Stormshadow. Although I never found out that until later because Ben believed his character's name had to be some sort of secret according to the rules. We made maps, we rolled for random encounters, we killed monsters together, we cheated like hell on our dice rolls, we rolled for random loot, and we got to about level 4 before I said to Ben one day, what if I draw a map and describe rooms to you, and you tell me what you're going to do? Ben was like, oh well, that's how you're supposed to play D&D. That's how you're supposed to play D&D, he tells me. After 3 months. Well, by pure coincidence, Ben and I moved to a different city. The capital city of Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby, a city with a total population of about 100,000 people and a D&D population slightly larger than Mount Hagen. Because as it turned out, the campus upon which I now lived was full of D&D players, mostly older and more experienced than me by a few years, and they were playing mostly Dragonlance modules and early Forgotten Realms. Over the years, I also had a go at many other RPGs, including Rollmaster and their Middle-earth role-playing game. I played Palladium, Rifts, Beyond the Supernatural, a lot of Rifts, some Star Wars, Transhuman Space, Judge Dredd, Dangerous Journeys by Gary Gygax, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of Vampire the Masquerade. Some by way of LARP, most by way of tabletop. Now, in between all of these adventures, I got it into my head I wanted to be an actor, writer, director, and so I went to film school. Twice. 2 different film schools. One for a diploma, one for a bachelor's degree. I did endless acting classes, and I spent a few years practicing Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu, Kempo, Arnis, and for the longest time I was a member of the Auckland Medieval Sword Club. As an actor, I did a lot of plays, like everyone does, of which I enjoyed Shakespeare the most. Shakespeare afforded me the chance to choreograph some sword fights, dress up in costumes, and do long soliloquies and speeches. I did some daytime TV roles, I did some movie parts, even some voiceover acting. Then later, after directing a few short films, some of them actually funded and played in festivals, I moved to Hollywood. I got a green card and did some roles there too. While I was in Los Angeles, I came across Critical Role. I discovered the rise of D&D 5th edition. I was immediately inspired by this, and I knew that this was where my life had been heading all along. I began the undertaking of creating an entirely new campaign setting called Sidariel. For myself and any future players, and for the stream that I knew that I was planning to produce sooner or later. I was just getting into all of this when good old COVID-19 came along and crushed it all. At this point, my wife, who is an American, and I decided that the safest place to be was my home country, New Zealand, an island fortress against COVID. We arrived literally the day before the first full-blown lockdown in New Zealand. Here in New Zealand, it wasn't long before I began to put together a crew and started streaming D&D 5e. We tried a number of scenarios, various crews, actors, non-actors. Eventually, we arrived at the Veingate Chronicles as it is today. Meanwhile, after running some paid games for a variety of clients in New Zealand and overseas using Zoom and D&D Beyond mostly, I joined forces with Jack Charles from Questbook and began a more full-time career as a professional dungeon master. I also started this YouTube channel. Since then, our Twitch stream has become affiliated. This YouTube channel has improved vastly, so I feel. Maybe not this video in particular, you know. And I run more RPG games, and I have more fun than anyone has a right to. Right now, between D&D 5e and Vampire the Masquerade, I'm managing to survive COVID-19 as a professional game master and gamer. It's a bit of a twist from the highfalutin arty films I once made, like Cogito, about a man deconstructing his demons, and Nova, a male stripper suffering from cognitive dissonance. But you know, I have an opportunity here to be part of a new wave of gamers who are legitimizing role-playing games as entertainment, as art, and more importantly, as a form of education, both for children and for adults. At 44, I'm doing exactly what I always secretly wanted to do, and for that I'm grateful. Despite the awfulness of the pandemic, it's an exciting time to live in some ways. This new gig economy has made my aspirations viable. It could be all over next week and I could be back to the talent agents and the casting directors and the cattle calls of my old life. Or people like you watching this now could choose to like, subscribe and follow. Maybe Sidariel will take off like a rocket ship. Who knows? Thanks for watching. If you're still here, check out some of our games, check out some videos, find your true will, and do it.
So I started with 2 boxes of pudding and 3 cups of cold milk. The package calls for 4, but I did 3, and I did this ahead of time and stored this in the refrigerator to chill. And I'm going to set this to the side. I've also got a thawed container of whipped topping that's been thawed in the refrigerator for a few hours, a silicone spoon, and a cup of powdered sugar measured out, and some cookies. These are Oreos, already in a bag, and I'm going to crush these later with a rolling pin. I've got ramekins here to store the dirt and another mixing bowl. And I've also got an electric mixer off to the side. And right here I've got 8 ounces of softened cream cheese. This has been out at room temperature. This is flavored cream cheese. You do not have to use flavored cream cheese. We're going to add the powdered sugar to this, so plain cream cheese is fine. The block of cream cheese is perfectly fine. I just happen to have strawberry flavored cream cheese around that we weren't using, so I went with that because strawberry will pair fine with chocolate. So I figured, why not? But plain cream cheese works perfectly well. We're using chocolate pudding anyway. You put that in your bowl here, try to get as much out as possible. Add your powdered sugar. You can whip the cream cheese first, because when you whip the powdered sugar in, you're kind of going to get a dust cloud. I didn't do that, and I got a little bit of a cloud. As long as you go on low speed, it's okay. You see the dust cloud there. But it's manageable as long as your bowl's tall enough and you go on low. Scrape as needed. I'm going to stop and scrape here because it's not getting all of the powdered sugar, and don't put the foil from the cream cheese in like I did. You don't want that in your final product, but scrape as needed until it becomes nice and soft. This is called creaming. You do this with butter as well. You can actually add softened butter to this recipe. It makes kind of like a cream cheese icing. That's how you make cream cheese icing, or cream cheese buttercream. But right now we just need the cream cheese and powdered sugar mixture. Now that that's done, we're going to add our pudding. Add the entire thing right into the bowl, and we're going to mix it with the mixer. Get as much of it as you can. Scrape the bowl down. Try not to lick the spoon, because you're going to need that spoon. And I know it's tempting. I really, really wanted to do it, because demons love pudding. I hope you know that. It's a fun fact for everyone. But once it's in there, you can get started mixing, again on low speed. Get this all incorporated, and scrape as needed again. It'll lighten up that pudding, it'll incorporate everything, and you'll have a nice creamy chocolate, and in this case chocolate strawberry mixture with a little added sugar. And this is the basis for your dirt or swamp sludge, whatever we were going to call this. This is usually called dirt or dirt pudding. But for the killer giant leeches, this is going to be swamp pudding. So once that's all done, scrape the sides down as needed. Use your whipped topping. This was thawed in the refrigerator for a few hours, so it's nice and loose. If it's frozen, this is going to be a really hard step to do, so you want to get this in the fridge for at least a couple of hours. But this is what's called folding. It's mixing, but you're not going to use the mixer. You're going to actually use the spoon, and I washed this off beforehand. Folding is kind of like cutting straight down through and then mixing around and around. It's gentle. You don't want to deflate that whipped topping. You would do the same thing with egg whites in a souffle or any dish really that has egg whites that make it fluffy. A chocolate mousse that uses whipped cream, which is essentially what dirt pudding is. It's like the quickie cheating version of chocolate mousse. You use instant pudding and whipped cream and kind of mix those together, and it's almost like chocolate mousse. It's like fake chocolate mousse, as long as you fold it together and don't break the whipped cream. If we just stirred this or used the mixer, we would break the cream and it would separate or deflate too much, and then it wouldn't be fluffy anymore. Once you're done, you'll get a lighter light brown like we had there, and then we'll go to the cookies. Get out your rolling pin or a hammer or punch it with your fists. Take out your frustrations on some cookies. And you're going to want the regular Oreos for this, or Hydrox, or whatever your brand of choice of chocolate sandwich cookie is. Or really, use Nutter Butters. I don't care. Whatever you prefer. But turn the bag over, smash them up, turn it over again, smash them up. Make sure they're good and crushed. But you don't want the double stuff. You don't need the rainbow filling. You want more chocolate cookie than filling. You want it to look like dirt. You want it to look like crumbs and just loose dirt, topsoil, whatever. So you want the cookie part more than the filling. In this case, usually I prefer the double stuff, as the filling's the good part. Everybody knows that. But these are fairly well crushed, so we'll get on to filling these cups. These are my little zombie ramekins for like souffles and things like that. but we're going to use them as pudding cups. Got several of them. I've also got a skull that's to hold like a cheese ball or a dip that I'm going to fill. You can put this in a bucket. One of the popular ways to serve dirt is just in one of those cheap beach buckets, the ones that you use to make a sandcastle. It comes with a little shovel. You fill it up, you layer your cookies and your pudding, and then layer cookies and pudding, and then you serve it with the shovel, and you put gummy worms on top. Sorry, I bumped the camera there a little. I'm not doing gummy worms because this is a leech movie and they don't sell gummy leeches. I know how to make gummy worms, but the succubus that I live with says if I give you her recipe, she'll send me to heaven, and I don't want to go up there with those people. They're boring. Who likes harp music? Really? Ugh. But the gummies that you can get, if you get a big enough one, I guess you could carve it into the shape of a leech. Right here I'm putting pretzel sticks in to kind of simulate like cattails or reeds sticking out of a swamp. Notice I didn't cover the top with cookies completely because I want some of the sludge to show through, because swamps aren't all grassy and dirty. They have a lot of water and stuff showing and mud. I want this to look more swampy. But normally with dirt you would just cover the entire top with cookie. But put a spoon in and enjoy. There you go, there's swamp pudding.
For those of you that stuck around or rejoined, thank you very much. I didn't think we'd get through an entire evening without some sort of calamity or catastrophe. Hooray! Yeah, we're back, right?
Yay!
So I'm informed at the end of the whole panic thing that apparently, despite it not looking like it was working on my end, it would actually work when we did it, and it did. So that's awesome. I did have to download and relink the intermission video, otherwise that wouldn't have played for whatever reason. So we're back. We're live again. This is the game brought to you by Dungeon Studios with your host Grom and Dr. Votorius and our esteemed, amazing guest, all the way from New Zealand, RKDM. Russell, did you hang out through all the chaos?
I'm still here. We're good.
That is excellent, sir. I apologize to you and the entire internet for all that nonsense, but we are back, especially the internet. Let me go ahead and finish my story. So like I said, expecting the party to come together to save themselves from the oppressive reign of the Priests of Torm, they instead decide to try to get somebody, to get one of their own killed. The new player stands up, points out another player's character, and everyone just looks at him with this, like, okay, that's a funny joke. Ha 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 ha. That didn't really happen. And he goes, oh, it did. It did. And then the player who was an actor friend of mine, we did Shakespeare together, decides to go into his little monologue, and out of nowhere, unprompted, he begins to speak about how he's a servant of the Walking Charlie, and just madness, right? Absolute madness. And I'm cracking up. The people at the table, in particular, the player that got singled out, is freaking out, right? So I'm like, all right, well, the attack starts, and everyone scatters to the four winds. Nobody's together. No one's working together. No one saves each other. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I got to figure this out. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to recover from that. That's a little weird. And at this phase of my gaming, we use what we called evil sheets. So you'd write down what you were going to do if you didn't want someone to know or play off of it, right?
Evil sheets, yes.
Ooh. Yeah. So I'm like, all right. I go. If you need to, send me an evil sheet really quick. So, you know, everyone's kind of furiously writing except for the player that had called out the other one. He goes, hey, they chase the guys. I don't fight them. He goes, I'm just going down for a stroll by the docks. I'm like, okay, cool. I collect in the evil sheets, and the player who was targeted was a wizard, and his sheet says, I'm going to follow the character who pointed me out. Let me know when we're alone. And I'm like, oh, you're like a first level wizard. Like, okay, like what are you going to do? Yell at him? Like a stiff breeze will kill you. And I go, okay. I go, hey man. I go, all right. You know, you're down in the docks. Nobody's around. Not sure what that whole scene was about, but you are here. I go, are you doing something? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'll hang out and see if anybody else makes their way down here. I'm like, okay, well, no one discussed coming down here, so that doesn't make any sense to me, but sure. He goes, okay. He goes, so what happens? I go, well, you sit on the dock there. It's quiet. I get another evil sheet in. I go, and your character falls asleep. So you go, I don't get a roll or anything? I go, are you an elf? No. No, then magical sleep, you're toast. Like, you're unconscious. He goes, okay, whatever. He goes, that's fine. He goes, I don't know why anybody would have followed me. I'm like, yeah, I can't think of a single reason why anyone would have followed your character. So I go through everybody else's evil sheets, and I get back around. I get a third round of these. And he goes, all right, man. He goes, so what happens when I wake up? And I pick up the evil sheets, and I go, you don't. He's like, what do you mean I don't? Just fold up the evil sheets. I go, well, it seems that somebody has murdered you in your sleep.
Oh, man.
So you want to make another character for tonight? He's like, he just looks at us. He goes, nah. He goes, I'm leaving. We're like, all right, buddy. We'll have a good time. And out he
started all this shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He was confused. I mean, confused about the outcome of this. And I'm like, all right, so that person never joined a game again.
Right.
That we had. I can't imagine why not. But that is one of those things that has lived on forever, along with other great stories of first game encounters, like the Dagger of Friendship. That's a favorite one of mine. I'll have to share that with you guys next week.
Right.
So,
right, wait, Shakespeare. What did you play in Shakespeare?
Sadly, I was never cool enough or good enough of an actor to do anything useful, except, two roles. One, I was the lead murderer in the Scottish play, during which I broke the wrist of one of the other murderers because the nylon prop swords we were using are not sharp at all. But despite choreographing the murder of Banquo, I believe it is, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but choreographing that apparently meant that on the night of the show in a live performance, you do things you didn't practice. So I went for the giant downward cleave. And this guy thought it was a cool idea to poke Banquo in the ass with his nylon sword, which put his wrist directly in the path of mine. And I'll give him credit. He didn't break character. He just kind of spun around on his heels like he was running away. So it looked good, and I delivered the line about who doth strike the light. I believe it's been a lot of years since I did it. And then I go backstage, and his hand is pointing a direction it shouldn't. The other one, though, I had the esteem of being Rosencrantz in Hamlet, during which the player who started all that shit in my game that never came back again, he was playing Hamlet. Quite a talented actor and a wonderful person.
Interesting.
I guess the spirit took him one night, and he was supposed to run over and leap and embrace me, which we had practiced a few times. And the opening night of the show, he got a little exuberant, and he smashed his head into my face when he did that. So the audience got a wonderful chuckle as I staggered around, I think unconscious, because he had headbutted me at full velocity. But I managed to keep my footing and didn't actually die on stage until the appointed time at the end of the show.
All right, Russell, and you're Shakespeare. Who were you in Shakespeare? I heard you did some Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah. I played Lord Buckingham in Richard III. I played Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet. I played, what's his name? Aaron the Moor in Titus Andronicus. Probably did something else, but I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, my favorite, I got to be in Midsummer Night's Dream. I got to play Nick Bottom. And that was a dream within a dream. It was great. I had such a great time.
Excellent.
Playing that.
Great play.
Awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah, wonderful stuff, man. Wonderful stuff. So, as I teased before, going into our second half here, we're going to have more of Russell talking because it's an amazing thing. So what I'm curious about is this, and I personally, as an old school gamer, remember how hard it was to find players and how wonderful it was to bring someone new into the fold. So when I had heard that there were people who are professional DMs, right? And this was a few years prior to Critical Role. When I had heard that, I'm like, that's ridiculous. I would never. Yeah, I would never. First of all, I couldn't imagine that people would pay for that. That it was a dream I dare not dream. But then I've always felt a little weird about it because I'm like, well, I would feel bad charging people. But in my context, I'm thinking of it as, you know, I have my home game and we meet a new person at the game store, and I'm like, well, it's $10 to come hang out at my house. You know, and like the old man said, you know, I used to have to tie a pork chop around my neck to get the dogs to play with me. So I couldn't imagine charging someone to hang out in my D&D game. Even today, despite getting feedback from players that they have a wonderful time, I still have that little bit of that imposter complex about like, well, it's not really that good. Am I really that interesting? But then I saw, obviously, Critical Role took off, and I'm a huge fan of that. Not the current season, but that's a whole other topic. And I know how much work I personally put into it.
Yeah.
So I get why it's a service that's worth money, and I get that people, like you said in your video, you live in an area whose population of gamers is negative. You may not have a choice, but I assume you expect to get something for your money. So the questions that I have is, how did you get into that, transitioning from obviously you're producing media to this? How'd that happen, and how have your experiences been? And
okay, well,
give it to us.
I mean, the short answer is I also suffered from a lot of imposter syndrome, and sometimes still do. But overall, I mean, if you're a DM and you're looking at getting into professional DMing, my suggestion, what I did is I started off with kids. I started off by advertising in some Facebook groups that were like parents groups, like homeschooling groups, where parents were looking to give their kids something to do besides the usual nonsense, which their kids are generally sick of. And of course, this was during lockdown too, so it was a little bit easier. And I ran games on Zoom. I mean, in fact, most of my games are on Zoom with a few exceptions. But I tend to prefer to play online with clients because I don't have to get out of bed particularly. You know, I can sit here in my underwear and put on a shirt with a collar and look like I'm the news presenter, or whatever. So yeah, starting off with kids is a great idea.
Is Zoom your preferred thing, or is that just the way you started for your voice and video?
Well, as it happens, I still use Zoom pretty much exclusively for most things. One of the reasons for that was the DSLR camera that I got for my YouTubing and stuff. It just would not connect to Discord for the longest time. Till they finally patched it after like 2 years. So I can do it on Discord now, but for the longest time it was Zoom was the thing. And I pay $16 a month for Zoom, and I get all the fancy bells and whistles. You can
and I use Zoom too. Merwin and I always debate about this, so I was wondering.
I think Zoom has better video picture quality in my opinion than Discord, and Discord gives rounded corners to all of the videos. Which is a little bit of an imposition on my part. Like at my end, I want to have control over whether the corner's round. Thanks very much, Discord. So you know, that's little things like that. I like to have complete. I'm not an egomaniac.
As I said, my players like to be able to control their own backgrounds. That's
right.
They
and you
love
can do that on Zoom as well. Yeah, exactly. So that's another fancy
Yeah.
thing about Zoom. Yeah, so what I did for the longest time is I recorded my sessions and I uploaded them to YouTube, and then I would edit them on YouTube, which was a big step backwards for me because I come from a video filmmaking background and YouTube's editor is just the worst. So I did that for a little while, and then I got sick of that. I started actually editing with Blackmagic and so on. But actually I've given up editing most of my videos, most of my game sessions, because there's too many of them and it's too hard. Nobody has time for that shit. One of my sessions, one of my games each week, one of my players actually does edit, but we're like 6 months behind from the streams to the YouTube videos. So yeah, that's why we use Zoom pretty much. What was our original question was about?
Well, was it how you got your path to where you are at with the professional DMing now? So kids, Facebook groups, put yourself out there during the pandemic.
Right. You said start with kids, and then what did you do after the kids?
Yeah, okay, so after the kids, I mean, I set up a website, I bought a domain name, you know, all the usual shit. And I supported this with a YouTube channel originally, and then a Twitch channel as well. So by having then I had something to actually advertise with. People could watch my games and go, "Oh, that guy's actually okay. I'd like to roleplay with him." So by having content online, that was important. Then I came across a group called Questbook, who helped me hugely. They take care of all the money side of stuff, and I don't have to worry about that. I just record which games I do. They've got their own Discord. I've got my Discord. And I send people to them, they send people to me.
And you still use them now?
They're essentially my agency, if you like.
Oh, then you got to give Questbook a huge shout out tonight.
Well, big shout out to questbook.nz. That's where to go if you want to book me as a DM. They've got a number of other storytellers on there. None of them are as good as me, of course.
Just kidding. All that and modest too. I appreciate that.
No, they're awesome. Actually, they're very good. There is a very high standard among Questbook DMs.
Now NZ signifying they're only down there with you guys. They're not international, or do they?
Well, the thing is, the DMs are all local, but we role play internationally. We have clients from all over the world, including North America. Lots of players from North America. They're usually the problem players, to be honest. No, I'm just kidding.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yep.
I'm fully kidding. That's
no, you don't know. We're not.
I think the truth is that North America, you guys have both the best and the worst players, and we have this kind of middle line here where we have a much lower population by far. So obviously, it's going to be a much smaller cross section of people.
Yeah. Unwashed masses, if you will.
Unwashed masses, if you will. So yeah, one of the things I do now is I go to a restaurant usually once a week or once every couple of weeks called the Dice and Fork Restaurant, which is located at Victoria Park Market in Auckland here in New Zealand. And Questbook runs an event there where they have maybe 2 or 3 DMs sometimes, and people pay to come in and play a game with one of the 3 DMs, and they get like a cheap token for drinks and stuff, and they buy some food, and I run them a one-shot, or somebody runs them a one-shot.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
I found that I would get players come back over and over again, and after I had like a session, 3 sessions with the same 3 players, I'm like, well, why don't we just run a campaign on Zoom? And I had to. Sometimes you have to convince them that Zoom actually is an effective medium. And in one case, like my Wednesday game is a face-to-face game because they didn't like Zoom, so we do face-to-face on Wednesday nights. But yeah, I find going to that restaurant, meeting lots of players, handing out. I have a piece of paper that I've printed out that has all my shit on it, right? So every time I go down and I sit down with a new player, I give them a piece of paper that has all my social links and data and all that stuff, and a business card from Questbook, which they can scan the QR code on, and it will take them straight to my page on their website. So a lot of kind of proactive marketing, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what it sounds like. That's what gets it rolling.
Yeah, and now and like I said, you do this. This is 100% your full-time gig.
This is my full-time gig. It is. That's besides sitting on my ass from time to time, which I do a lot of it too.
What's the besides your time coalescing the wispy vapors of the ether into cogent thoughts? So you're a bullshitter.
I'm a bullshitter by trade. That's correct.
Wait. You prep 6 games a week, though, right? 6.
I do.
Same campaign, same world, same adventures, or all different?
So what do we got? We got Veingate Chronicles, which is the actors stream. That's kind of like the flagship game, and that's the one I probably prep the most for because it's for the stream, or it has been traditionally the main thing on the stream. More recently, then we got the Dagdagiel campaign. That's another city. We have Sunfall Company, which is a group of players who formed a company called Sunfall. This is all D&D 5e. It's all in the same world. Frostmore Crows is another group who came together and they created a company called the Frostmore Crows.
That's a great name, by the way.
It's my modus operandi, is to get the players to form a mercenary company. That way I can tie them into the storyline easily, and I can throw them around the world in different ways. And it's a good sort of...
I have tried that.
That's great.
I've been trying that for the last couple of years, and I cannot get them to do that. I'm like, it's like, well, you guys are together. Do you have something people are going to call you by? And I can never get them to do that. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, it is hard to, I mean, Frostmoor Crows, they literally took like 2 months to come up with that title, with that name. Whereas the Sunfall Company, they came up with it within like 20 minutes. So, you know, it depends on the group.
If they don't come up with one, I give them a name. That's like my Ravenloft, you know. They're the Maldición de la Cruz de la Plata. You know, give them a name immediately if they can't come up with one, and then they sort of buy into the name, and they call themselves the Damned. No, they call themselves the Damned now, which is Maldición, right? So they took that as their name.
With my Masquerade games, I was running 2 different vampire games. I've actually chosen to combine them more recently. One of them seemed to have the fate of just never being able to keep players on board, while the other one maintained sort of 5 players for about a year and a half. So while my Chicago campaign was just rolling through players, and I had like 2 people that would just consistently be there, and yet dozens of other people would roll in, play for 3 sessions, and have some reason they couldn't keep playing. They ran out of money. They had to go to Australia. They, you know, whatever it was. There's always, it seems like a coincidence, but over the long time, I'm sort of starting to go, hey, this campaign's doomed. There's a curse. So I combined these 2 campaigns. But with the Chicago campaign, what was different, I started everybody off as humans, and they all met at a Jubilee party on a steamship in Lake Michigan off Chicago, right? Which turned out to be basically a vampire fest, where the vampires were holding a yearly celebration of their own, and the players had been invited along as food.
Right.
And during the process of this, them being invited along as food, they're sitting at dining tables. There's all these things going on. Next thing, the boat, the steamboat called the Chicago Queen, gets attacked by rockets and starts sinking. And then the vampires start shitting themselves, and they're going, okay, we need these people. We're going to turn them into ghouls because we're going to need their strength to get us out of this fight. And so it began that way. And so it was very organic as to how we got them into it, which is a bit different to the like Sunfall Company or the other groups. And these guys ended up being called the Chicago Queen Coterie by the prince of the city. Later on, they decided to call themselves Minerva's Shield, which hasn't really stuck quite as well as the Chicago Queen Coterie. But that's partly because I'm a bastard and I have all my he's just continue to refer to them under the original title.
Yeah, say, look, if they hit on something good, you gotta steer them a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Minerva's Shield is a good name, to be fair, but you know, I just like egging them. Just quite fun.
Fair enough. Fair. So now, with your with the D&D games, so different, same world, different locations. Do you recycle plots and storylines, or is it is there always separate? Always new?
Sometimes when there is like 0 chance of anybody catching me out, I might. But for the most part, these stories exist simultaneously in different parts of the world, and they can affect each other. So, for the most part, they are independent and different storylines.
So that's got to be
NPCs crossover, themes crossover. Somebody goes and starts a war over here, then the players over here are going to feel the effects of that, you know. But yeah, I don't recycle. I do recycle one-shots because I play a lot of one-shots. I run a lot of one-shots, and thusly I have created a lot of them, and I have a book.
Well, and if you have the stuff for them, it makes sense to reutilize them with different players. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would think with the quantity of games and the model that you run, pay to play, that doing your games in an episodic fashion probably makes more sense.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Now, you do Zoom, so what do you do for your maps? You're just going to share a map? Do you use battle maps? Do you let players move? How do you do that?
Okay. Well, that again is an interesting question, and it depends on the game. For the longest time, I had a battle map on a table over here, and I had another camera, and I used minis.
Okay.
And I would move them around for the players and ask them questions like, "Is this where you want to be? Is that good?" Blah blah blah. I used Questbook has a Roll20 account, which we DMs use, and they've got all the stuff. So I use that for mapping and so on. I use D&D Beyond for character sheets, encounters, and basically running the game. I run the game with D&D Beyond, and Roll20 is good for maps. I am not au fait enough with Roll20 to really integrate those two things, and I'm not sure I even want to.
I'm with you on that. It's interesting you said Questbook has access to Roll20.
Yeah, they have a Roll20 account.
That's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's accessible if you're using their service. You have access to that VBT. No, that's great too. That's great.
I feel like Doc is taking a sideways shot at me because I forced everyone to roll 20 for our recent playtest of my modules.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just pointing out that because I've been really it's myself, because I've been always stacking on you do all this work in Roll20, it's worth money to a paid DM.
Right.
Russell doesn't necessarily use Roll20, but he's still putting a lot of stuff into his. He's got a battle map set up. He's got minis set up for people. So there's.
I do use. I mean, I do draw maps in Roll20. I do. In fact, I make maps. I make maps in a vector program. I just use OpenOffice, which is free, and I make shitloads of maps in there, and have done for about 4 or 5 years now. And so I have a stack of maps, and I will draw them up in Roll20 as well, if and when necessary. Or if I have an idea for a particular scenario that's going to certainly need a map. And I create maps just out of whim anyway. You just, as you do, you sit around and you're like, I'm going to just draw a map. So you end up with all of this shit.
The thing is, for me, I came at it as a very minimalist dungeon master. I started using some Photoshop software I have with layers, and we moved we move figures around on the board, and then I save the picture sometimes, and that's all I really needed. So
that's cool.
For me, I never needed a Roll20 or anything like that. So
I mean, look, to be honest, half my games, at least half the time, I run games in Theater of the Mind. Most of the time, in fact, I try to play Theater of the Mind until the point at which it just gets too complicated for Theater of the Mind. And so, and there's different styles of game too. Vampire doesn't really use maps. I don't really use maps in Vampire. That's all Theater of the Mind. It's just cinematic, descriptive role playing. Even the dice system, the game system itself, I'm very loose with. It's all about the pace and the action and the engagement of the players. That's what you're aiming for. And the maps are nice, but they don't actually provide that in and of themselves. They can help to add to that, but if you don't have pace and story, then your maps are that's nice.
Well, I'm so intrigued because I've been sucked into 5e for so long. I really want to play something more role-playing vampire. I feel it pulling me in. I feel it.
Right. Well. Well, I mean, come and play with me sometime. I won't even charge you for, at least at once.
Ooh. He's throwing out coupons. I appreciate that. So let me ask you. So like I said, that shit, I've always wanted. I've wondered about that for a while. To loop this in with Dungeon Studios, right? One of the things as a longtime creative, I always wanted to get into it. When we were coming up, we had one guy that supposedly had worked for TSR. Never could verify that, but there was there was the guy like from our area, and it always seemed like the kind of thing that was impossible. You couldn't, I don't live where the company is, and you don't have access to do anything. That has all changed now. Multiple larger companies, people doing freelance work. The Internet of Things has made it, or the Internet and all of the things facilitate you working remotely and submitting information and everything. So it's a lot more open than it used to be. And then you have places like Dungeon Studios that are, you run Kickstarters, you bring people in, and you can do all that kind of stuff. So I always wanted to get to that point. I always wanted to get involved in those kind of things. And it's amazing that we can do that now. And then like your career is, building and running these games, and you stream on Twitch and YouTube and everything, and that is it's a real job, Mom. See, I told you that it would get could be nerdy enough to get somewhere someday, but that is that's one of those things, and that's why it I love it. So I'm thankful that we have that kind of opportunity now as modern gamers. I've missed a couple of waves. I'm a little behind on this one, but I remember, when again, like I said, we're of the same vintage. When gaming came out and when YouTube started, and when for me Magic was a big one for me. Magic the Gathering. You got laughed at the idea that you could do this, professionally, and I remember, talking to people how cool it would be, for example, to go to tournaments and write up tournament reports and deck tech and things. And I was like, oh, nuts, you'd never be able to do that. And then all of a sudden you get Star City Games. You get Wizards obviously has their own publications. The Duelist, that old magazine. It became a real thing. Gaming became a real thing. And now, like I said, with the advent of Kickstarter, crowdsourcing, and independent companies, people like me get to take a crack at putting their name on some material and putting it out there. So, if you want to support my dreams and the studio in general, please check out our Kickstarter. Shameless plug, I had to throw that in there. Or our website, Enron Chronicle, anything that we do. Check us out on Patreon, all the socials. Like, share, subscribe, and all the things. Look, I got to work it in there, because if I don't, how do you grow things? So here's a question. So we threw this around, me and Doc, in our first episode. And we'll give you the opportunity here as we're getting towards the midnight hour. I think it's a good way to close out. So we talked about you doing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We've talked about Vampire and your preference towards more cinematic things. So outside of those two games, do you have a favorite system mechanically, and do you have a favorite setting regardless of game?
Outside of those two things.
Outside of those two.
So not Masquerade and not D&D.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I have a fondness for the old Rifts game. If you've ever played Rifts, Palladium.
I have, and in fact, when Doc brought up the Leyline thing, that was the character that hooked me in Rifts. I didn't want to play Glitter Boy. I didn't want to be any of the other weirdos. I wanted to be a Leyline walker.
Right.
Or like that, just that art, the image of that character from the book, I remember from the old Palladium book, hooked me right into the whole thing.
It's pretty cool. I'm trying to think of other role-playing games. I mean, I've played a lot of other role-playing games. I like Call of Cthulhu, but I tend to be more inclined to create my own stuff, to be honest with you. Like, I have spent probably over 10 years working on a science fiction universe, which I've done a little bit of role-playing in it, but so far it's probably still my favorite scenario to play in, but it's very intricate and complex for anybody that doesn't know anything about it, coming into a new genre or a new scenario, especially sci-fi.
Mechanically complicated or universe complicated?
Universe complicated. And also mechanically complicated. I don't have a game system for it. I am currently, I'll tell you a secret, I'm developing a really, really light RPG system at the moment, which at the moment it's this simple. You start off with 100 points. You spend your points on making your character. You choose traits like I am strong. You don't have a strength score. You just know that your character is strong.
Have your traits.
Right? And you can use these points to bid against the DM's points. The DM will allocate a certain number of points to an encounter, for example. And if you spend more points during that encounter than the DM has allocated, then you will probably win. There's sort of bargaining going on where it's storytelling using these points. You get more points for doing stuff, you spend points, so on. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into that, but a very, very rules-light system is what I prefer if I can. Which is why I like Masquerade, actually. But and it's really hard for me to not use a system like that. It's such a clean, elegant system. I really...
An elegant system for a more civilized age, if you will?
Yeah, you might say.
So, let me ask you...
I didn't get his favorite horror movie. We went for a break, and
hold on. I'm going to give you the closing question, but I got to ask this. Like I said, I have fond memories of seeing Empire Strikes Back and Jedi in the theater as a youth.
Right.
So I'm with you on the sci-fi stuff. I love that kind of stuff, and I always had a hard time finding a good game for it to translate. But mechanically, you are a narrative-driven person. So have you seen or experienced any of the Fate systems? I believe one of the editions of like the Warhammer RPG used this.
Right.
Right. I've definitely heard of it. I've met people that played it. I really would love to play it, but I have honestly never played Fate. I can't say I have, and I'm really keen to give it a go.
I hope I named the right system, but yeah, like I heard about, same as you. I haven't done it, but somebody explained to me how you get this various pool of dice, not numbers, not math, but little symbols that it goes good, it goes bad, it goes horrible, something unexpected happens. In the various phases, then you build the scene, you build this pile of dice, you roll the big chunk of it, and then the narrator, the storyteller of the game, parses those out, and based on the symbols and everything, will narrates with the player's input how the scene goes. And I'm like, that sounds like such a great idea. I just don't know how you get the traditional gamers into that kind of thing, but I think that'd be awesome. So, yeah, I'm waiting to find someone who's really played it to really kind of give me a deep talking through it, but I think it's awesome. So, all right, well, without further ado, Doc, I'm going to give you the closing question before we move into...
I don't know, did we lose Russell? I lost him on Streamlabs.
Did you?
I did lose him. Russell, if you're still with us, favorite horror movie?
Oh, yeah, he dropped off. Hang on a second. We'll figure that out in 1 second, folks.
We lost him. I had 2 questions for him.
I talked him to death. I apologize, Internet. I've ruined it. I ruined it all.
You didn't let me get in my question.
I was giving you the closing question. That's what I was trying to do. Let me just shoot him a message directly, see if we can get him back in here.
I think something happened there. I think I heard someone come in.
Oh. Yeah, I show him. I show it disconnected him is what I see. So I don't see what's up. Yeah. Well, we will have to figure that out, folks. Give us 1 second. Have you and I talked about this? What the favorite horror movie was? What's yours?
No, we were having the debate. We were having our debate. I still think Exorcist 3 is a fantabulous movie, but I really enjoy Hellraiser 2. For some reason, that whole bizarre other dimensional world, the way it's projected there with the Cenobites and everything, I really like that film. It's one of my favorite top horror films. But like I said, I think Exorcist 3 really kicks it when Father Michael comes out of the hole on the crucifix. I mean, just the what do I want to say? The authentication to the original law and story of the whole possession was great. There he is. Russell's back with us. I'm talking about possession.
Oh, hey, what's up? Thank you. Welcome back. Let me just make sure you are in here showing. Oh, we should have you now.
So that's one of my favorites of all time. So Russ, I got a couple questions for you before we go. 2 questions.
All right.
You mentioned you only had access to 2 books when you first started playing, right? You had Oriental Adventures and the Monster Manual too, right?
Yeah.
But you were also in foreign country, blah, blah, blah. Did you experience, because for me, I remember, I've told this crew already, I had to go get my books at the toy store and ask the guy, like, secretly, and you had to go in the back room because it's all about satanic panic. Did you have to avoid any of the satanic panic?
Oh, my God. Okay, so I guess I must have been about 14 years old at high school. We had a whole bunch of people come into our school and round up all the D&D players, and they took us to this room. They spent about 45 minutes.
Wait, where is this? So
this is in Papua New Guinea.
Okay, go ahead.
Port Moresby International High School, and so we have this bunch of. They were Christian fundamentalist. What's the term? They were there to promulgate.
Evangelize? Or proselytize, I think is the term.
Yeah. All of those words.
Project.
And so, yeah, they spent 45 minutes telling us, did you know that the Monster Manual has, like, the word demon appears 326 times? And did you know this? And I'm like, yes, because it's a game about fighting monsters. Like, I was 13 or something at the time, and honestly didn't make any sense to me at all. The funny thing is, it was about 2 years after that, my friend and I sacrificed a lizard for all of the powers of the in the Dungeon Master's Guide or some shit. We did some silly things, but we would never have thought of doing that if it hadn't been for these people.
All right. One last question. Favorite horror movie? You can give us like, what's your favorite horror film?
Favorite horror film?
Yes.
Okay, well, probably the one that comes to mind is Event Horizon.
It's a really good one.
Yeah. See, that's another good one too. Yeah. I was just saying, I love Hellraiser too.
Right.
Hellraiser 2, but that Event Horizon is another great one too.
I'll tell you another good one though is have you seen Babadook?
No, this is something I have to check out. What's it called?
It's called Babadook.
All
I
right.
think that's what it's called. I'm gonna double check that, but it's an Australian film actually. Might be The Babadook.
I'll check with Barry. He's our resident movie demon.
2014 movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah, my daughter was only 4. I didn't see that. I'll have to check that out.
Good recommendation. I'll tell you something. So I want to circle back to a point you had made earlier about your first forays into vampire and finding that lore book, right? No rules but lore. When it comes to horror movies, one of my least favorite, and I think it's one of the dumbest movies ever, is The Blair Witch Project.
Oh my God, yes.
Here's the thing, though. That movie, hot garbage, except for the last 8 seconds. A buddy of mine, my friend, one of his friends was a professional movie extra, and I think had something to do with that movie somehow. Maybe she had some connection to it, so he will die on the hill that it's the best movie ever, horror movie ever, right? Hot garbage. But much like the book you were describing, where you didn't even know it was a game book, that movie had the best marketing I have ever seen, because there were a lot of people, if you remember it, that thought it was not a movie, like that it was a documentary.
It was very War of the
Brilliant.
Brilliant. The 90s. Kind of technique.
Social engineering, basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that's also Maryland State's horror movie. When we talk about a horror movie from every state in the U.S., that would be Maryland's. Would be the Blair Witch Project.
Well, hold on. Isn't Exorcist set in Georgetown? Isn't that in Maryland?
That would be Washington D.C. They don't give that Maryland cred.
Look, dude, I've been there. You have to drive into Maryland to go there. No,
we consider those two different things. Maryland's a cult. D.C. is a whole nother entity.
I get it. Okay. All right. Well, hey, we are past the midnight hour here in mine and Doc's time zone. Thank everybody who's been hanging out again, as we have said numerous times. Please check us out on social media. Check out our Kickstarter live now. Enter on Adventures Volume 2.
Russell, thanks for coming, man, and please come back anytime. I know you're busy and stuff. We'd love to have you back. And
I love hanging out with you guys. I love being on your show. Sometimes, timing is a problem, and lives and busy lives, and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, you have got to be massively busy with your gaming schedule. So let me open it up to you. Do you got a closing thought you want to share with the interwebs?
A closing thought to share with the interwebs. Well, no, but what can I think of for a closing thought to share with the interwebs?
My closing thing, I usually say something like, "Oh, no matter what, wherever you start, you always start out odd." That's my closing thought.
Right. There you go. Well, I think you should do the closing thought, because you already have one. I haven't thought about a closing thought.
No. Come on.
No. You know what? We're going to get... Okay, so this is going to be your homework for your next appearance. You're going to have an ending line. Like Doc said, wherever you start, you always start out odd. And what I've been saying and working on is very simple. We play tabletop role-playing games because they are limitless. So why listen to conversations that are any different?
Right.
And with that, thank you, Internet. You guys have a great night. And catch us next week, Monday night. We'll be live again. Hopefully we won't have the same kind of disastrous technical problems in the middle, but I'm sure we will.
They weren't disastrous. It wasn't disastrous at all.
No, not at all. It just makes a lot of editing work for our producer, so good for him. So, all right. Thank you, Internet. Thank you, guys. Russell, thank you so much for being with us. I can't wait to talk to you again. I love this long format stuff. Very insightful. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Roll initiative.
Yeah.